All right, good morning. Good morning to everybody that joins through Facebook or YouTube, whatever platform this comes to you by. Thank you for watching this morning. I'm talking about awakening the apostolic. Awakening the apostolic. I'm here with my household of faith. We are gathered outdoors today. Move this camera just a hair. And we are going to be talking about the apostolic in this day. So I'm going to jump right into this. So we have been in Acts chapter 2 this morning. And I was looking at verse 42 with you, as we've talked about this verse of scripture many, many times. We're going to talk about it again today. It says, and they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine. Say that with me, apostles' doctrine.
Apostles' doctrine.
And fellowship.
Fellowship.
Say that with me, and fellowship.
And fellowship.
Now I want you to notice in Acts 2:42, it says, in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, comma. These two are coupled together. What did they continue in? They continued in not just the doctrine of the apostles, but they had to learn how to continue in apostolic doctrine. What is apostolic doctrine? That's what I'm going to talk to you about today, is understanding what is apostolic doctrine. This is something, when you get an understanding of it, it will begin to blow your mind, because what we begin to understand here is we are not here to start or continue a conventional, institutionalized church. You know, as I was saying earlier to you, those who we would call the early church or early Christians, they weren't even known as Christians until Antioch. I have lots of questions concerning things, and many of my questions are yet to be answered, but I have one question that I have asked for many years. How is it that those who were like Paul, the Apostle Paul, who was a Pharisee, a teacher of the law, and a Jew. Listen real closely to me this morning, all right? Paul even talks about his pedigree as a Jew. That he was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was a teacher of the law. He said, if there was a Jew, I was one. Most definitely. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin. How is it that a man of such culture can readily embrace the apostolic, which does not even appear in the Old Testament? In the Old Testament, we had priests and prophets and kings, but we never saw those who were apostles in the Old Testament. How is it that someone like Paul, who grew up so steeped in the culture of the Jews and their religion, so readily embrace this apostolic movement that he is now in? The first thing that I want to reveal to you about the apostolic is first the term and the title that comes from Greek civilization. Herein lies a problem within the modern church. If you begin to talk about the apostle, those who do not deem themselves as apostles, in their mind they think, what does this have to do with me? Because we think in individualistic terms. We think, you know, I'm this, I'm that, you're this, you're that, what does that have to do with me? In these terms, it has everything to do with you. Because we have to understand what Jesus has really done. When Jesus came on the scene, he was not creating something that was additional to or an adaptation of Judaism. Are you with me? Jesus has done something. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus had followers who were called disciples. And he then called those disciples, it says he called his 12 apostles. This is a term and a title that does not come from the Hebrews. It does not come from Judaism, and it doesn't even come from the Old Testament. You need to see this with me. Jesus took those that were his disciples and he called them apostles. This term apostolos comes from the Greek civilization. Why would Jesus call his disciples a Greek term? So these early Christians that we're reading about that continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, this is important, and fellowship, in breaking of bread and in prayers, these Christians and these apostles, they are not an adaptation of the Old Testament. They are an entirely new breed of something completely different in the earth. When God said he was going to do a new thing, and that Jesus, when he said, this is a new testament, a new covenant that is in my blood, he was not doing according to that which was in the old. This was completely new. Who are these apostles? Where does this all come from? When Jesus began what we call the church, those that followed him, their leaders were going to carry a title of a former world empire. There's been 4 major world empires that have existed. There were the Babylonians. Say that with me, Babylonian.
Babylonians.
They were conquered by the Persians, the Medes and the Persians. Then another world empire came, and it was the Greek Empire. And then the 4th empire was the Roman Empire. While Jesus is on earth, Jesus is among the Jewish people, but the Jews are under Roman Empire. They are under Roman law, under Romanism. Listen very closely with what I'm telling you here. Jesus has taken those who follow him, those who believe that he is the Son of God, those who he has trained, those who he has taught, those who he has imparted who he is, and he has now called them by a title of someone from a former world empire. Why is this? The leaders of Jesus' church, because Jesus said he was going to build his church and the gates of hell would not prevail against it. When Jesus said this in Matthew 16, we think, listen, this is going to be the hardest thing for us to receive in this day, because we've been steeped in churchianity. We've been steeped in the culture of a church. We've been steeped in the culture of institutionalism. We've been steeped in the songs, the liturgy, the religion, all of the things of what we know as the church. When Jesus said, I will build my church, he was not talking about that which was like the synagogue. For the most part, what man has built, it has been built and resembles that of a synagogue. When we read in Hebrews that we are not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, that word assemble it comes from the Greek word synago, or where we get synagogue. Yes, we are to assemble ourselves together. We are to come together as often as we can. But when Jesus said in Matthew 16 to Peter, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, he did not mean a building with a steeple and a pulpit and a worship team, nor did he mean with lights or cameras or a social media ministry or any of that. The word he used was the word ecclesia, which meant something that was out in the public square, something that was out in the marketplace. Another Greek term that we need to understand. But I've got to move on from here and understand first this. The leaders that carry the title of a former world empire were that of Greek admirals of culture. Let me say that again. An apostle, or the apostolos, was an admiral of culture. Those within the Greek Empire who were known as apostles, they were empowered by Greece to convert a conquered culture into a Greek culture. Let me explain this further to you. Why is it that the Jews still have their religion, their temple, and everything while Jesus is there under Roman law and rule? Because the Romans practiced a different kind of government. From them came the democratic, republic type government. If Rome conquered you, good morning everybody that's joining. If Rome conquered you, they did not dismantle your culture. They simply put in a puppet king like Herod. They would put in somebody who oversaw you, made sure that any rebellion was put down, but otherwise they did not dismantle your culture. If you were a Jew or whatever God you worship, you could worship that God, but you paid your taxes to Rome. You know, you had a certain freedom as an individual to practice whatever you believe. Listen to me very closely. Jesus didn't call his apostles or his disciples, he didn't call them centurions. He didn't call them Herods. He called them apostles. Why? Because he's pulling something into their understanding about what type of kingdom this is. The Greeks, who were unlike the Romans, they did not leave cultures intact. The idea of imperialism was a complete cultural revolution. What does that mean? When the Greeks came in and conquered you, they did not leave your culture intact. They dismantled your entire culture. When the Greeks came in, they converted you from your language to speak Greek. They converted you from your lifestyle to Greek lifestyle. You didn't worship your own gods, you worshiped Greek gods. Here's the vast difference in thinking. You've probably heard this said. When you're in Rome, you do as the Romans. Not so with the Greeks. In Greece, you are Greek. Period. You're Greek. Does that make sense to you today? See, the Romans had a certain loosed-in type kingdom. Live as you want. Don't rebel against us, and give us your taxes. Not the Greeks. When the Greeks conquered a land, you became Greek or you died. You converted wholly and completely to Grecia. Why is Jesus using this term? Listen real closely. These apostles that we are reading about in Acts chapter 2 here, these were Jewish people who were under Roman law, Roman rule, and yet they were going to act like Greeks. Listen closely to what I just said again. Peter, James, John, Matthew, all of these men, including that of the Apostle Paul, these were all Jewish people who were raised under Jewish culture. And if you know anything about Jewish culture, it is a culture. It is not a religion, it is a culture. They were under Roman law, but they were going to act as Greeks. So we have to understand this about why Jesus called his disciples, those who were going to lead his church, as apostles. They were going to go on a cultural conquest to conquer the culture. That's what an apostle is. An apostle is one who comes to conquer a culture.
Amen.
Are you listening to what I'm telling you? I'm not here to sermonize. I'm not here to just have something to talk about with you. You've got to understand what part you are in this. Because the apostle understands that it is not about him.
That's right.
But it's about everyone who adheres to what he believes, his authority that he's been given by the kingdom, and how they are involved in this. Let me go on and explain this. An apostle, this is why I say we have people who are called apostles, but they do not understand the apostolic. These are not men who were called to lead a church. These were men who were called to conquer a culture.
Amen.
This is why Paul was so successful at what he did. Paul did not go and propagate Jewish culture in Gentile lands. See, this is why he had a conflict with Peter. Because when Peter came, Peter had adhered to the Gentiles. But when the other Jews showed up, he withdrew himself, and Paul rebuked him. Because he said, why do you compel these people, but then leave them when the Jews show up? Paul was able to successfully remove himself from Jewish culture, even though he's under Roman law and is a Roman citizen, and yet enter any culture and begin to convert it to the kingdom's culture. Paul entered into Gentile lands with kingdom culture and then converted them to the kingdom, not as Christianized Jews. Are you with me? See, we think that these were Jews that just became Christians. Not so. They were something totally different. They had to have the mind of an apostle. They had to have the mind of that which was from a Greek admiral who was sent into a land to conquer a culture. See, most Christians today, we are very Americanized. Now, this is where it may be hard for you to receive. Thank you for listening this morning. Good morning, Becky. Good to see you. This is what becomes very hard for us in our culture, because and I'm talking to the American church today. You may be watching me from some other part of the world, but I'm talking as far as America. We're very Americanized, and we have some church culture, but we don't have kingdom culture. We know how to go to church. We know how to sing hymns. We know how to sing worship songs. We know how to clap and lift our hands. We know how to bring tithes. We know how to listen to a sermon, and then we know how to go home. But that does not mean that you have kingdom culture. The apostles were not coming to start an institutionalized church. They were not coming to build a synagogue, to have a place for people to worship. When an apostle entered the land, he entered the land to convert the land to the kingdom.
Amen.
To convert every person that was in that land to the kingdom. Kingdom culture gave them the ability to be fluid no matter what civilization they entered. It didn't matter if Paul went into Asia or Bithynia or Galatia. It didn't matter what gods they worshiped. It didn't matter if he went to Rome, Chauncey. Whatever God they worshiped, he would find a way to talk kingdom culture. He even found a statue to an unknown God.
Yes, he did.
And he said, aha, I know the unknown God. It didn't matter if he went to the temple of Diana, walked right into the middle of their religious service, and began to preach Jesus to them. He wasn't there just to get them saved. He wasn't there just to get them to believe in another God. He wasn't there to get them to just to accept Christ along with their other gods. He was there to convert them to the kingdom.
Amen.
Its lifestyle, its way of living, its language.
Yes.
But here's the whole thing that we have to understand. The apostle never worked alone. He never worked alone. Paul had a whole team of people. He mentions them throughout the New Testament. Men, women. He had an apostolic team because that's what Greek apostles did. You have to understand when Jesus called his disciples apostles, he just called them a Greek cultural conqueror. You're going to be just like the Greek culture conqueror. You're going to go conquer cultures for the kingdom. What did an apostle do in Greece? If you were sent out from Greece as an apostle, you'll see the word and term apostle predates Christianity. It predates the church. An apostle was sent out by Greece with a fleet of ships, and in that fleet of ships, it consisted of business people, tradesmen, townspeople. They all got on the ship with him. Some of them were doctors and lawyers and taxmen and fishermen and carpenters. Do you see where Jesus was going with this?
Oh, yeah.
Because Jesus was not a religious man. He was not a religious leader. He was a carpenter. And when he called those to follow him who became apostles, they were not religiously trained people. They were not lawyers of the law. They were not Pharisees. They were not Sadducees. They were what? Fishermen and tax collectors and so on and so forth. Why? None of these men were pulpiteers. None of these men were going to go build a synagogue. They were going to build his church. Not a synagogue, but something that was going to be out in the public square. Why is this? We can have church every Sunday. We can have church every Saturday, but never be in the culture.
Amen.
Did you notice that Paul the apostle, he didn't go just to build a church in Corinth that was that of building and stone, but he was actually out in the marketplace as a tent maker.
Yep.
Why? Because he had the mind of an apostle. I'm going to be where the people are every day because I'm going to affect the culture. That's what ecclesia means, to be out in the marketplace. You know, Jesus himself is a carpenter. An apostolic team consisted of business people, tradespeople, and they would enter into everyday life and were taught and trained and carried kingdom culture. This is why this is important. Because God gives apostles in order that there will be apostolic people. So you can't look at this and say, oh, well, this man's an apostle. Good. You have to understand why an apostle is given. He is given on behalf of teaching you and training you in apostolic doctrine. This is not just the doctrine of the apostles. This is apostolic doctrine. This is the understanding of the apostle. Are you with me? Because the term apostle means to be sent out. Who's being sent out? All of those who were with the apostle, including the apostle. They're all sent out. They're sent out into the culture wherever they are, whether it's the carpentry world, the automotive world, the climate world, the cleaning world, whatever world you are in.
Amen.
That's the world that there is the expectation from the kingdom for you to convert it. There is listen, this is more than you've got to understand this in the roots of Christianity. In the roots of Christianity, this is more than about you just getting saved and get your name in the Lamb's Book of Life and you making it into heaven. You have, this is why apostolic doctrine becomes dangerous. Because an apostle is both valuable and dangerous. Why? Because one, he carries the authority of the kingdom to dismantle. It's like what God told Jeremiah. You will throw down, uproot, but then you'll build. There are things that are going to have to be dismantled. The present state of how we conduct Christianity in America is having to be dismantled. Or we will never carry out kingdom culture. We will just simply continue to have church culture. We've got churches on every corner in this country. I'm not angry, but I'm telling you, we have churches on every corner, but we've lost the culture. Amen. You know why? Because we don't have the thinking of the apostles.
Amen. Wow.
An apostle comes with this in mind. I'm going to conquer the culture, not lead a fellowship of believers. But you're going to have to fellowship with me in order to understand not only my doctrine, but who I am, how I think. See, Jesus in Hebrews 3, he is the apostle and high priest of our faith.
Yes, he is.
How is it that the disciples or the apostles understood how to be an apostle? They were with Jesus.
Amen.
And people took notice of that. They said, these are unlearned and ignorant men, but they've been with Jesus. See, when you've been with an apostle, you don't talk like everybody else. You don't think like everybody else because you don't have the culture of everybody else. You have the culture of the kingdom and you become dangerous to the culture. Why is this? Because most of the apostles, they lost their lives once it was discovered what they were doing.
Wow, that's right.
An apostle does not come to have a religious service. An apostle does not come to have a Christian teaching training center. An apostle comes to overthrow the culture.
Amen.
And you will wonder why I would run from that. I have run from that and ran from it from years because I understood this and knew it. Because when you are in a culture, whether it's American or Ethiopian or Nigerian or German, it doesn't matter what culture you're in, if an apostle is there, he is not there to maintain the culture and Christianize it. He is there to overthrow it and convert it to the kingdom.
Amen.
From within. By whatever means, by whatever apparatus that he needs to take on. And listen, and the people that are made available to him by the kingdom.
Amen.
He's going to utilize every person around him. With Paul, it didn't matter. Hey, man, woman, it didn't matter. Whatever you do, wherever you go, you're going to carry kingdom culture into that place. This is why they had the understanding that they were part of a family. Because every family has its own culture. Right. This is how this all ties together. We think we can build a household of faith and become a family. Listen really closely. I can become a spiritual father to you, but then you lose the complete understanding that a spiritual father, it can also be an apostle. You can become very comfortable with me. You can sit and let me sit in my chair and opine to you every week, and you listen to wisdom and teaching. But if you don't understand what we're doing, where we're going, right, then you'll lose focus of what your part is in this. You'll think, oh, I just need to show up every Sunday and listen to him. Oh, no, honey, this is not what this is. Apostles are Monday to Sunday.
Amen.
They're 7 days a week.
Yes.
You're a 7-day a week Christian. You're not Sunday Christians that show up to listen to the Bible and listen to training and listen to teaching and try to get whatever you can get out of it and bring your tithes and sing a song and then go back to what you were doing. No, listen to me. What you're doing is very important. Your job, your trade, your business, it's very important because you're out in the culture every day. And God has called you to influence every person that comes through your doors, every person that comes by you.
Amen.
And you may be, and you may think, well, I'm just trying to focus on my business. Yes, you're going to have to do that at the same time. That's how Paul did. Just sitting there making tents. What happened? He made a relationship with Priscilla and Aquila, who then became an influence to Apollos. Because he just thought it was, John the Baptist had changed everything and just brought in water baptism, and you got to be more than baptized.
That's right.
You've got to be baptized in the culture of the kingdom. That's why he gave them the Spirit. You can see immediately after they received the Spirit, Philip. If you receive the Spirit, then you've received the Spirit of the kingdom.
Amen.
You can't receive the Spirit of the kingdom and then just try to have just some church culture in your life. This is where we have completely the
That's
church
right.
and all of the whole, and I'm sorry if this offends you, but I've got to do it. The whole mega church movement is completely lost because it is not converting people to kingdom culture. It is simply providing a religious service to people week after week after week after week. And if we can keep up the status quo, but it's not working.
Amen.
It's not working.
Amen.
How is it that these people in 300 years caused the collapse of Rome? Because they thought like apostles. You've got to begin to think like an apostle. Paul had to answer the question, are all apostles? No, they're not. But all have got to think like them.
Amen.
Because Jesus was the apostle, and all of his disciples began to think like an apostle, and they became apostles. What Jesus was starting was not a church. It was an apostolic movement
That's right.
to overthrow the culture, not only that of the Jews, but of the Romans. You may sit there and think, huh? Jesus wanted to overthrow. He said, I ain't come to build this temple.
That's right.
He said, matter of fact, you can tear down this temple, and in 3 days, I'll build it again.
Wow.
All they heard was their culture. This man just said, he's going to tear down our temple and rebuild it in 3 days. See, people only hear where they're cultured.
That's right.
You only hear where you're cultured from. So what are the apostles? They got their fleet together regularly and they discussed their strategies. We have to get together regularly and discuss our strategy. We have to discuss the kingdom's culture. And we also have to worship the king.
Amen.
One thing to understand about the apostolic culture, because this is an apostolic culture, we call this in Acts 2:42 the 4 pillars of apostolic culture. This was their culture. This is not the 4 pillars of the church. This is the 4 pillars of their culture. The pillars of their culture are the apostles' doctrine or apostolic doctrine, understanding, fellowship, not only with the apostle, but with each other. We see that they were still meeting at the temple, but then they started going from house to house breaking bread. What happened? They began breaking away from the system. It's hard to break away from culture. Very hard. Listen, many of you listening to me, many of you sitting here today, you have been church cultured. You might have been raised in church, and all that you know is the experience of church, but that doesn't mean it's kingdom.
That's right.
This becomes dangerous. I know that what I'm vocalizing becomes dangerous because I'm talking about dismantling church culture. church culture can become the enemy of the kingdom.
Amen.
How much of the kingdom are you cultured to? Becomes the question. Allegiance and loyalty are seen as the highest merits within the kingdom. Why? Because the apostle knew, and I'm talking in the terms, when people hear this, they think, oh, he's talking about Peter, John, Paul. I'm talking about one of those who were a Greek apostle, sent from Greece to convert a land. He knew when he entered that land that there would be those who would try to destroy him. Why? Because he is a symbol from the kingdom that the existing culture is counter of that of the kingdom. Just his arrival and his presence. Are you hearing what I'm telling you?
Oh, yeah.
The apostles did not announce themselves when they walked into a city. Hey, the apostle of God is here. Because in their mind and their understanding, if they understood the Greek Empire, they would know this man is here to overthrow our entire culture. When they recognized who Paul was, that's why they drug him out of the temple of Diana and beat him and left him for dead. Because he was going to upend their entire lifestyle. They said, he's going to affect our business. He's going to affect our money. People ain't going to worship Diana anymore. And we won't be able to make these little silver statues. See, you start an apostle going to affect everything. He's going to affect business, commerce. He doesn't come to just affect the church and the church world and all the little sacerdotal stuff going on. He comes to upend everything. The whole culture is going to be changed. This is scary. It's very scary. It's very frightening to people. But this is necessary to the believers in the day that we're in. So you may be sitting here today, you may be sitting here and you may be thinking, why is this important to me? I'm not an apostle. Because I'm telling you what Christianity is in its original design. It's that simple. Jesus did not come here, die, shed his blood, and resurrect just for us to have a building and a place to meet on Sunday and sing songs.
Amen.
If that's all he did, then you can find that anywhere.
Yep.
You can find that at a Buddhist temple, because that's about all that Buddha did. You can find that at an Islamic mosque, because that's what Muhammad did. But that ain't what Jesus did. See, that statement in itself flies in the face of their culture. Because when Jesus came, he came to upend every culture. This is why the Jews knew, we got to get rid of this guy. He threatens our entire lifestyle. He's threatening our entire religion. If we don't put a stop to this, there won't be any more. The whole world is gone after this guy. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There won't be Judaism anymore.
Right.
There won't be any of this. There won't be the little Jewish flag. Nobody will have any allegiance to any other culture except that one. Do you see what this guy is carrying? Jesus is carrying the kingdom on the inside of him. What does he say to his apostles? The kingdom's inside of you. It's within you. Now you're going to carry the kingdom out there. Go into all the world and preach the gospel. So when Jesus' disciples became apostles, they became the host of an invading army that was going to dismantle the present culture from within. The minds, the lifestyles, and the existence of people was going to change. That's why every one of the apostles was put to death. Because once it was discovered, who they are and what they were doing and the way they thought. It didn't matter what city you entered, that person's dangerous. An apostle is very dangerous because he's not here to play church and he's not here to have church. He is here to convert the culture. So these followers of Jesus now become dangerous. Why? Because they threaten the existence of any culture, any religion. Because it was not based on, listen, this is the most important part. Those that followed Jesus, they were dangerous because what they believed was not based on religion, ethnicity, race, nationality, creed, not Hebraism, not Judaism, not Zionism, but it was in the culture and the being of Christ. How do I know that? When I look at the church of Antioch, it tells me all the different cultures that were present. Right. There were Jews, Ethiopians, Syrians. That means there was Arab people. You've got the mix of everything. And the people there are not looking at somebody and saying, well, you know, that's just a black thing, or that's a white thing, or whatever. This was a Christ thing.
Amen.
And this was the culture they began to adhere to, is the culture or the lifestyle of Jesus. That lifestyle was not what was the lifestyle of the world.
That's right.
And everything they talked about was contrary to how the world thought, lived. Your lifestyle as a Christian, you can't fit in. Stop trying to fit in. Amen. If you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Christ, stop trying to fit into the culture. That's what we've already made this mistake. As I heard somebody recently say, Sherry, the world has become very churchy, and the church has become very worldly. You're not here to fit in. You're here to take over. That becomes a dangerous statement of what I just said. Because here's what the church is trying to do. It's just trying to coexist with the world. You can't. Because if you become a friend of the world, you become the enemy of God.
Amen.
Do you see how the apostles thought now? You can't be a friend with the world, because if you are, now you're God's enemy. You've either got to align yourself with God or with the world. There is no in between.
Right.
You can't be a pseudo-Christian. You can't have one foot here and one foot there. You can't do it. And if you have, then you'll see where you're going wrong. You'll lose influence. You'll lose kingdom influence. You'll wonder why when you pray, nothing happens. Why? Because when you pray, you have to pray in Jesus' name. And when you're praying in Jesus' name, that means you're talking to God, the Father, through His Son, through the lifestyle, the culture, the thinking of Jesus. That's why you can't talk in your own thinking. You have to talk in the thinking of Christ to the Father. That was a mouthful, but I hope you got that. So you've got to know this. You're dangerous now. You're dangerous. And you're even more dangerous when you embrace the apostolic and you become activated in it. 2 points and then I'll be closing with this. When you embrace apostolic thinking and you embrace, I'm not talking about there are those that have been listening there. When I start talking apostolic, people think, oh, you're talking about the apostolic church that we've known, that they baptize in a certain way and dunk this and what. No, I'm not talking about that at all. You're completely ignorant and do not understand what the apostolos is. When you embrace apostolic thinking and apostolic culture, you become dangerous. Look around at each other. You become dangerous to the existing culture.
Dangerous to the existing.
I'm not here. I'm going to make a statement that's probably going to blow some of you's mind. I am not here to uphold American culture. Now, I respect American culture. I respect America. I respect our laws. I respect our freedoms. But I am not here to propagate American culture. I am not here as an apostle of God to try to spread American culture around the world. I'm not here for imperialistic propagation other than that of the kingdom. Yes, I have American citizenship. So did Paul. He had Roman citizenship, but he did not go to keep up Roman law.
That's right.
The Romans wound up putting him to death. because they understood what he was about to do. He went all the way to the highest authority. And some of them have said, you almost have me convinced. But then they understood, he's not Roman cultured. He's not going to leave us intact. He's going to do like the Greeks do. Completely dismantle us. You're dangerous to the existence and the threatened. You are a threat to whoever this is advantageous to. This is why people will fight this. The church will fight the apostolic. The culture will fight the apostolic, because you're dangerous to everyone that it is an advantage for it to continue. If the things that are continue, this is why we can't go back to doing church. People are waiting. This is what I have seen, the mistake of the Christians. They're waiting for everything to go back to normal. That's the worst thing that could happen. You know why? Because if it goes back to normal, then we're just going to keep getting more of what we've already gotten.
That's right.
Change is here, and change has to happen, and you've got to accept the change and move forward and leave the past to the past. People are looking for what I call the V pattern. We were here, and we went down, and they wanted to come back. Not me. It went down, and I don't really care where it goes from there, but I know that I'm going up.
Amen.
I'm going with the kingdom here.
Amen.
You're dangerous because the system, the whole system, I don't care whether it's the church system, the denominational system, whatever it is, and I know some of you, and I'm getting a lot of hearts up right now. I know there are some people, if they want it to return to normal so they can keep the whole church game going, keep the whole church, because that's all they know.
Yeah.
It's their culture. I'm not trying to be hard. It's their culture. It's their culture. And that culture is advantageous to them. Advantageous.
Amen.
To them. Number 2, it's dangerous to the apostle and his team. This is why persecution and retaliation became possible, and it possibly increases if they're discovered. Here I am putting it out in public, but I'm not the only one. There are many others. And when they come to the understanding of what this is and what they're actually doing, you've got to move. Let me say this to you. You've got to move away from trying to build a building and a sanctuary and a youth center and all of these things as programs, and start building the kingdom and the culture of the kingdom inside of your people.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
Stop trying to provide programs.
Yes.
Amen.
Now, I'm not saying that hostility will be on every front, because some cultures are ready to embrace this and they will welcome it. The people will welcome it. The leaders won't always welcome it, but the people will. There are people, Linda, they're ready for a change. There are people, they are so ready for a change. They're so tired of doing. This is why when this broke out, I told my wife sitting back here, I said, there's a lot of pastors and preachers, their eyes are going to be open for the first time. They're actually going to get out from behind their pulpit, get out of their building. Some of them is having church in a parking lot, standing on a roof, whatever. But their eyes have been opened to, why have we been stuck inside the fort for so long?
That's right.
We've been in a fort mentality. We've just been trying to protect ourselves and try to keep our Christian culture and our church culture, but we ain't having no effect out here. Get out of the walls. Get out of just going to church on Sunday. All that's got to go away. It's got to go away. It's got to go away. And you have got to get kingdom culture. Kingdom culture. That culture is that of an apostle. You've got to begin to think. When I go out here, I'm out here to conquer the culture. You may arrive tomorrow morning at work and think, I got to make money. I got to pay bills. I got overhead. But that's not why you're really there. If that's all that your life has become, you're going to be miserable. And if all your life has become is making money, you're going to become miserable. Because at the end of the money, it's like my spiritual father says, money won't make you happy, but it'll keep you giggling till something better comes along. It's not gonna satisfy or fulfill, because you've got to have a bigger purpose than just building a business. If you're a pastor and listening to me, you've got to have a bigger purpose than just building a church and just building a church building, just so that you can tell all your church friends, I got so many people. Listen, I've been to all the church growth conferences and all of that, and it's all about nickels and noses and what building we're building, and we're building a new fellowship hall. And so who cares? Or is your city affected? Do people think like Jesus? Do your people think like Jesus? Do they talk like Jesus, walk like Jesus, act like Jesus? I mean, it says right here in Acts 2 that many signs and wonders were done by the apostles. Why? Because everybody was on the same boat together. They all were going in the same direction together. Hey, thanks for joining. Hey, thanks for joining Becky, Lynette. Good to see you. Let me see who else is here. Anthony, David. Good to see y'all this morning. All right, just giving some understanding this morning of what the apostolic is and what an apostle is. Good to see you. I'm going to be signing off from here. I'm going to pray with my household of faith. Thank you for joining us today. It has been a pleasure. Good to see you, David. Ken, good to see you. I was on the radio with Ken not long ago. Ken, give them some information of how they can listen to you on the radio, all right? I'm going to be signing off from here, and I will talk to you soon. Love all of you. Have a great Sunday afternoon.